Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm Mia Smithies and today we're going to talk about the books that I read in July and August. I know it's September, who cares about July? And it's also the 12th, so who cares about August? But I do, and I read some amazing books and I just wanted to talk about them. Thank you for everyone who watched my last video. It's nice that you watched it and hopefully got something from it, apart from the fact that I am a massive library book hoarder. Sorry this video is taking so long to come out. I have been doing things on my days off. I went to the beach, swam in the sea, got absolutely no footage of that obviously. I went to a really nice bookshop in Derbyshire, I think Scarvin Books, very cool. It's even got a cafe behind like a wall of books. It does both new and secondhand and they're all kind of mixed together. It's really nice. I've got a list because I film on my phone of what I read, because do you know what, it was a long time ago and I'll forget what books I read in what order. So the first book I read in July was Girlhood by Melissa Febos. This was probably a favourite of July and a favourite of the year so far. It's a collection of essays where Febos talks about her girlhood and girlhood in general and links it to the way that when you mature physically quite fast, people perceive you differently and treat you differently, and sometimes that's not in a very nice way, and you don't have the emotional intelligence to kind of deal with it in an appropriate manner. You know, you haven't talked about it with your mum, maybe you don't even ever talk about it with your mum, you know, you're suddenly being thrust out of girlhood and into adulthood but you're still only 12. You know, the way that she writes is gorgeous, it's lyrical, it's intelligent, it's emotional. She mixes in different studies and mythologies to kind of make her point and create her point. My favourite one is about a mirror test, which is like how different animals perceive themselves in a mirror. And it's kind of like she links that to how kind of when you reach the end of your girlhood, the beginning of your teenage years, you kind of perceive yourself how others perceive you for the first time, and it's kind of like looking in a warped mirror to yourself and you're like, I don't recognise this person that they see, and you're not sure how to see yourself the way that you are to you anymore. I thought that one was really... It made me feel seen, because that is kind of how I see myself, you know, like, yeah. The next book I read was Tenants by Vicky Spratt. This is, I think the tagline is something like at the front line of the UK's housing emergency. So it's all about UK housing politics. I started reading this at the end of June on my holiday in Cyprus, because nothing says beach read like UK renters market politics. This book basically outlines how we got to the crisis that we're in the UK right now, kind of linking to Section 21 evictions, which are no fault evictions. Your landlord can evict you for absolutely no reason. Say hello to Smudge. You know, you could be the perfect tenant, you could pay your bills on time, and they could go, do you know what, I want you out my house in 2 months' time, and there's nothing you can do about it. There's no way to fight it. There's no way to kind of... You have to wait until you're homeless to even get help. And when the social housing finds your place, they won't look at where you live now, what you can afford. It'll just be, look, here's a house, have it. Which isn't always the best. It also looks at the Help to Buy scheme that Margaret Thatcher introduced, basically where they'd sell off council houses to their tenants, which in theory is really good, and that's great. Like, everyone wants to be a homeowner, and a cheap way of owning your home is the Help to Buy scheme. The thing is, they didn't replace those social houses, so now we're like literally a million social housing short. And it doesn't help that most of those old council houses fall back into the hands of career landlords, who then can charge extortionate amounts for the same house that was once owned by the council and pretty affordable. It has stories from actual people who were evicted for no reason, or are under the threat of eviction, or have had their landlords raise the price of the house so much that they can't afford it anymore. They've looked at rogue landlords who leave the house in like disrepair and basically horrid living conditions. It looks at illegal housing, where landlords just fit as many people in as possible who may not be here in the most stable of circumstances and charge them extortionate amounts. It looks at I can't think, but basically it looks at all facets of the housing market and what it's like today as a UK renter. It's very much not apolitical. Like, Vicky Spratt is on the side of the renter, and that is clear throughout the book. Like, she is like, I have been through this. This is why it's wrong. This is why the government should do better. It doesn't necessarily outline exactly what the government should do, but nor should it. It's not Vicky Spratt's place to create new government policies and all that. It's the government's job, you know. The government should be building these new social houses. The government should be doing this. And Vicky Spratt really places onus on the government to start doing that. I think it's a must read if you live in the UK and you want to know more about the housing crisis. Yeah. The next one I read was Briefly a Delicious Life. This is actually the only fiction book I finished in July. It's by Nell Stevens. It's her first fiction novel. I think she's written a few non-fictions. But yeah, this is her first fiction novel. It charts Blanca, who is I want to say like 15th century ghost living in an 18th century charter house, which is where monks used to live and now don't. This is all she's known her whole life. She grew up in the village near the charter house. She watches her family descend through the generations, and just generally tries to protect young women from the unwanted advances of men, which is pretty nice, you know. She's living her best life when suddenly French novelist George Sand's, her two children, and her lover, I think his name's Frédéric Chopin, the pianist, come for the winter in the charter house in Mallorca to get sun. Little do they know, there's not that much, even though it is a Spanish island. Blanca is immediately amored with George Sands. George Sands is unlike any woman she's ever met before. She wears men's clothes, she smokes cigars, she stays up late at night writing on her novel. And she falls in love. And she wants to follow George Sands, and that's basically what happens. We follow George Sands and her family through Blanca's eyes during their time in Mallorca. The writing is beautiful, particularly the way emotions are written in and the way that music is written in and stories. I loved learning more about Blanca's past and why she is the way she is, how she ended up as a ghost. You know, I loved hearing about the way that she as a ghost felt free to love women, and the same thing was not available for George Sand's being a living woman. I thought it was queer, but without making it the focus. The focus was still very much, it was a historical fiction, which I didn't think I'd enjoy. I'm not really a historical fiction girl, but it turns out when you've got queer ghosts in it, I'm a fan. This again was a real standout for me this year and this month. I really want my own copy because I borrowed it off BorrowBox on the library, and I saw it the other day in Waterstones and I almost bought it because I just want to read it again and just to own it and underline really nice passages, which I'm not even someone who does that much, but I would just love to. The next book I read is Such a Sweet Singing, edited by Kirsty Gunn. Now, the premise of this poetry collection is to showcase kind of like female life, female love, female experiences through all female poets, and to give them a place where like female desires were talked about. And while that's really lovely, like that's great, I don't think that's really what the poetry collection did. Most of the poets' work was good, really enjoyable to read, but it didn't really have the focus that the heading was under. It was just like, I don't know, like a poem about nature, and I didn't really see how that linked to female desire or female love or, you know, any of the things that the book said it was going to be discussing. I think it's an interesting coffee table book to pick up and read a poem from, but it doesn't really work. It doesn't flow as a collection to read as a collection. It was pretty much one of the only misses of the year for me. It was just a bit mid. Like, I think by the end of the year I'll have probably forgotten I read it, and I can't say that for most of the books I've read this year, so yeah, it's not really for me. The next book I read was for me is The Book of Delights by Ross Gay. It's kind of like, he calls them essayettes. They're like short, couple of pages, sometimes even only a page, kind of like musings on something that delights him throughout a year in his life. They could be deep and meaningful, they could be light and just a bit of fun. They're kind of just about thinking about what makes life full of delights. He said while writing this, he suddenly had loads of delights to talk about. Sometimes he ruminates on the past and his past, sometimes he is talking about a delight that has happened just that day. There are great themes of love and friendship, and also nature features a lot. As just being, you know, loitering around outside your favourite cafe, just drinking your coffee, or lying in the park, eyes closed, facing the sky. Kind of all of those little things where you're just being, you're just existing, you don't have a purpose, you're not trying to get somewhere. And it was really beautifully written. You can tell Ross Gay is a poet, you can tell he is passionate about the things that he's talking about, and I definitely want to read some of his poetry, because if it is anything like this book, I know I will enjoy it. The last book I read was another poetry collection. It was The Cat Prince and Other Poems by Michael Pedersen. Now, you may know Michael Pedersen from his hit book Boyfriends last year, in which he charts the formative male friendships in his life. This was written alongside that in the same kind of time period, and this is a collection of poems that are whimsical and both grounded in reality and also kind of abstract. I really enjoyed the poem. I think it was clever, I think it was witty, I think it was quick and sharp and fun. I especially liked The Cat Prince, which is the titular poem. It's weird and also playful, and to be honest, a great depiction of what children are like. I think it's one definitely to read, and I really want to find his other poetry collection so that I can enjoy more of his work. Like, I'm such a Michael Pedersen fan now. I really enjoyed it. But that's all that I read in July. I think that was a good reading month. I read mainly shorter books. I kind of got into a bit of a slump towards the end of the month. So I'm glad that I managed to squeeze in that one last collection. In August, I also read 6 books, I think. So that's quite typical of me. Some of these were a little bit longer, but again, towards the end of the month, I tapered off, and I still quite haven't got it back. I've only finished one book this month. But the books that I read Wild Things by Laurie to start with. This is actually my second time reading the book this year. I think it was May, June that it got released. And I read it because I pre-ordered them. I love Laurie. I think they're amazing female to female rom-coms. I just love them, I really do. They're grown up, they're fun, they're flirty, they're kind of deep as well. Like, it's more of a character study that ends with love than it is just a romance, you know. Wild Things is about Elle and her friends, Ray, Jamie, and trying to remember the names is literally the worst thing in the world. Oh, I can't see it. Here we go. Will. Oh my god. Sorry, Will. He was their straight benefactor for their little plan to move to the countryside outside of London and start a queer commune. He's straight. He's just recently broken up with his girlfriend. Well, his girlfriend's broken up with him. His grandma died and left him an inheritance, which helps them buy the house. Elle is in love with her best friend Ray, and has been since they met 5 years ago, working at a newspaper company. Elle is stuck in a rut in life, in love, and she's not sure how to break free of that cycle. So she vows to do one wild thing every month for the year. Obviously, the wildest thing she does is move into the commune in the countryside, but it kind of becomes less about being more wild, more about just pushing yourself to overcome like internal boundaries that stop you from doing things that you know you're going to enjoy. I loved this one. I couldn't pick a favourite Laurie, but this is definitely up there because it's relatable to me, I think. I always feel that I'm stuck in a rut and I'm not sure how to break myself free. Maybe I should do some wild things. This is my wild thing, actually, starting a YouTube, because I am not the biggest fan of the sound of my own voice. Crazy. But I just love this book. It makes me feel warm inside. It makes me feel happy. And the way that she writes characters, they feel fully fleshed even if they only have a few sentences. Jamie was a particular joy. He starts an Instagram account which is basically just a thirst trap. I think it's called The Village People. Yeah, he's funny. He's funny. The next book I read, I also started in July. It's called You Have a Friend in 10A by Maggie Shipstead. It's a short story collection. And each story was so unique. Like, you felt like you were reading an entire book in only 20 pages. It was that fully fleshed out and realised. Every story had its own unique voice, its own unique style, just its own unique presence on the page. It was incredible. My favourite story, I'm not gonna lie, I don't know the name of, but it was set in Paris, and it kind of it's centered around 2 deaths that happened about 6 months apart, and you kind of go from the first death to the second, although you know about both to begin with. It's about love and lust and hiding a Jewish pianist and his family during the Second World War. It's heartwarming, heartbreaking, and I actually cried. And then a couple of pages later, you've got another story completely different from that, in which a newly married couple go on a road trip through Eastern Europe and disaster strikes. And that one, I had to put the book down for several days because I was just like, whoa, like, it was wild. I didn't see where it was going. I thought, ooh, they're just gonna break up, but it's so much more than that. Every story I enjoyed, every story I felt like I got something from. No story felt too long or too short, and it was really nice to just sit down, pick up, read one story, put it down, pick up, read another story. Yeah, I loved it. And the next book I read was probably my favourite of the month. It was for the Alison Pages Pocket Pages Book Club. Alison Pages is another YouTube creator whose videos I love, and if you're watching this, you should definitely go watch hers. It was called When I Sing, Mountains Dance by Irene Solà, translated from Catalan by Mara Faye Lethem. This is kind of an experimental story. It plays with form, it plays with voice, it plays with characters. It's hard to say what it's about. It's basically about a village in the Pyrenees, and also about the Pyrenees mountains themselves and the creatures and witches and grass and animals that live there. Each kind of thing gets its own chapter, and it does loosely tell a story of a family who lived there throughout 3 generations, or 2 generations, I think. But also from the perspective of outside people who are looking in on that family and seeing them in a fresh light. It starts off with a chapter from the point of view of a storm which kills a father, leaving the mother and 2 children alone. About 18 years later, a freak accident in the forest sees the son die, and you see his ghost, you see other ghosts. It looks at some political things from a completely apolitical point of view. It just is it is what it is, and you are left to fill in the blanks yourself. The writing is gorgeous and lyrical and just so good. Like, I don't have the words for how much I enjoyed it. It was just everything you could want out of a book, really. If you like that kind of book, it was litfic at its finest. The next book I read was The Girl Who Cried Diamonds by Rebecca Hirsch Garcia. This one I read via NetGalley, so thank you for that. It's a short story collection. I loved it. It's very like, the writing style is slightly detached, but you're also very much in their brain. It's all about the weird happenings of the world, and usually the stories were like a female narrator that sometimes you didn't even know the name of, was just kind of experiencing weird going-ons. My favourites, there was one, the titular one, The Girl Who Cried Diamonds, where there's this girl who like cries diamonds and bleeds rubies and wheezes gold, and I don't remember what she poos, I'm not going to lie, but you know what I mean, it's like a gem of some kind. And she lives in a favela in an unnamed place in a very small town, and everyone in her town knows she does this, but no one cares. And then people keep leaving the town to go to the city for work, and eventually stories reach the city of this girl who cries diamonds, and the city is greedy and they want to take her and use her and take her diamonds and take her rubies, and eventually they bleed the life right out of her and she just starts crying water. And I think that was a really good, what are they called? Fable. It was a really good fable for kind of the human greed of the world right now, and it really left me with a lot to think about. There is another one that sticks out. There's this woman who saves this homeless man, and he starts following her everywhere and becoming a part of her life, even though she doesn't want him to. That one was unsettling and weird and enjoyable. I would really recommend this collection. I want a physical copy when the book comes out, which I think is this month, or maybe next month, and I just want to read it again because it was really fun. Like, the stories were well written, they were well paced, they were just good. I had a really good reading month so far this month. The next book I read was Girlhood by Julia Copus, which is a poetry collection. It's kind of like a poetry collection in two halves. The first half is kind of more girlhood, random poems, and they have a lot of inference, so they'll infer something that you have to take from it. Like, there's one in which a professor takes advantage of a student, but you're left to infer a lot of what advantages are taken and what the student feels about it. And then it moves on to the second half of the poem, which is, I forget the name, but I think her first name was Marguerite, and she attempts to kill a famous actress on stage in a play and gets sent to kind of a mental facility in which there is a psychoanalyst that studies her, and it's kind of the next set of poems are a conversation between those two, which I really enjoyed. The only thing with this poetry collection, I felt like both poetry collections were missing something for being so short. I thought they should have been two separate books and more fully fleshed out for both of them, rather than being squeezed into one collection. But apart from that, I really did enjoy it. The last book I read was Speak by Laurie, Halse, Andersen, and I read the graphic novel version, so it was illustrated by Emily Carroll. This was an incredible book. The writing was gorgeous, like so lyrical, and the pictures, the illustrations, they were so perfect for just displaying how horrible it was, feeling like you don't have a voice. So this centers on Nell, who has been sexually assaulted by a popular senior at a summer party. She calls the police only to find that she can't say anything. The party gets disbanded by the police and she is a bit of a social outcast at school. It follows her first year in high school, where she feels like she can't speak, she can't say anything. She's struggling with all aspects of her life, her friendships, her schoolwork, everything's slipping because she is so traumatized by what happened and finding she doesn't have the words for it. It's definitely a book that you need to go into knowing those trigger warnings, because it is very difficult to read. Like, I couldn't fly through it like you normally would a graphic novel. I had to really take my time to make sure that I was feeling okay about it. But it is definitely worth the read. Like, it is amazingly written and beautifully illustrated, and really it's very relatable to a lot of experiences that girls go through at school. Like, it was originally written in the 90s, it's just as prevalent today in the 2020s, you know. And I think it's one of those things that teenagers would find a lot of solace from reading, and even adults who still don't have the voice can get a lot of solace from reading. that is everything that I read this month. I've noticed it's a half-hour video, so I'm sorry about that, but I did talk about 12 books, so I think I did it quite quickly. Hopefully I'll have another video out much quicker than this last one took. Yeah, thank you if you got to this point for watching. Please like it, please subscribe, maybe even share it. It doesn't matter if you don't do any of those things. I just want to thank you for sitting here and listening to me babble about books. It is my special interest and I love sharing them. So yes, see you in the next one. Bye!